When we talk about critical infrastructure protection, I mean, we're talking about capabilities, that really impact critical requirements, and that is a bit of a subjective determination, but as it relates to this presentation, it's areas that would be considered vital to a business or to a government in terms of being able to operate. Typically, a critical infrastructure asset would need to communicate worldwide, so there's a variety of communications infrastructure necessary to support that, as well as a focus on operations. And when we talk about CIP as it relates to physical protection, it's really about the protection and safety of those endpoints as well as the networks that enable remote access. To really understand your baseline associated with normal traffic, that's physical and cyber traffic, that happens to be on a network that supports critical infrastructure, as well as being cost effective. And that's about balancing the integrity, confidentiality, and availability triad of that information, as well as risk management and ensuring that the risk profile is consistent with the appetite of the organization. So there's, traditionally a separation between physical security and cyber security. The physical security, Bubba's, talk about fences and card reader access and things of that nature that are very, very physical, very much keeping people out and keeping insiders honest through vetting with a variety of authentication methods. And though also, because these things have been networked, we have a cybersecurity component that goes right along with that. Similar objectives, but it's increasingly complex. And it used to be, a long time ago, years ago, you might have a local server that might authenticate personnel. And you may still have that today, but undoubtedly you have a regional or a reach-back server from which that information is communicating. So you've introduced a risk for threat associated with that system. Same with gates. The same with video surveillance, the same even with manipulation of analytics and things of that nature. So they are separate and have traditionally been treated separately, but they really need to be together based on current threat vectors, really requiring a coordinated approach to security. I mean, really we're talking about needing a holistic plan. So when we talk about physical cybersecurity, it is about this notion of, once you network a smart gate, it's now had its surface area for attack dramatically increased by things on that network and things on associated networks. So protection of that network now is vital to ensure that those physical security assets function as desired. And there are IT implications, of course, of cyber hacking, but with physical security, there is real-world effects, just like any OT, of cyber penetrations, where you can have fences and gates, barricades manipulated remotely. You can have them manipulated remotely without it being acknowledged at a central location. If you have someone that's on your network and is manipulating that data that's coming from that endpoint, whether it's a mechanical device operating a gate or a turnstile or something of that nature, So it's very, very much a real-world effect of cyber. And if we were doing a SCADA presentation, you know, we would talk about the ability of folks on those networks to take command of automatic transfer switches and of generators. And it's very analogous here, you know, where because we have remote access to network certain things, including video surveillance, that we have introduced a considerable level of risk. So though we focus on the risk and, you know, we want to address the risk, there is still a requirement to maintain, in this area, on the operational impacts. You may not often be able just to shut down a particular gate if you feel like it's been compromised, or a particular endpoint, but you have to mitigate those operational impacts and work around them. That's that availability, much like in the SCADA world, is very high with physical security. You have to improve the response time. You know, the whole goal to being able to effectively operate in today's physical security area is to improve adequate response time against the threat. That includes reducing human error, and that can be, you know, attributable also to bad data or bad intel that may be manipulated to that force protection provider in the field that creates human error associated with inadequate or improper assumptions that he has. Of course, reducing equipment failures, and always maintaining control, particularly on a you know, outer perimeter of a campus, of a military installation, of a critical business area. So the notion of physical cyber is there, and that they are blended, and you cannot treat them independently any longer. As we look at how we manage the risk, we can talk about defense in depth. There's, of course, lots of different ways to prevent defense in depth. You know, I like to focus on a third-party validated security, that you have an independent person or group or an agency, an industry-recognized forum that has certified components, both physical and cyber, to really give you that layer of defense. Now, from a physical standpoint, of course, the layers of defense are various gates or various ways of authenticating that might be required, and those aren't ones that we really will talk about too much here. You know, we will talk more about the defense in depth from a cybersecurity perspective. So when we talk about physical security, you know, gates, turnstiles, access control, and things of that nature, and the fact that they are networked. And now we're going to apply a risk lens and look at defense in depth. So you know, might have the inclination first to, you know, lock it down. We're going to have this outer ring of a lot of firewalls. We are going to, you know, maybe put a lot of intrusion detection. Of course, we're going to run antivirus. We're going to layer a lot of things on this network, as you typically would any network, to prevent, you know, malware and unauthorized access and control. And that's great, and I think that in this area, particularly as it relates to operational technology, it's important to have a good consultation with this so that you can understand what the impacts might be as you increase certain things in cybersecurity. You might have an impact on your operational framework. And there are operational challenges. So unlike an IT system where you might be able to take more extreme and drastic measures in the event of a cyber attack, in the operational world, when you're dealing with operational gates and things of that nature, physical access, you know, you do have a 24/7 type of a force protection. So you have to be flexible enough to recognize that particular penetration and work around it, and to have good planning in place from an event and incident management standpoint to deal with those circumstances that will undoubtedly happen. I mean, that's just part of operating networks. But we have in the physical security realm a lot of legacy systems that do not have adequate security measures in them. We have both the physical threat of a person trying to physically impersonate and access, an authorized person that's able to access, as well as that potential penetration on the cyber side. We have disparate networks, so you might have a variety of networks that provide sensing into a physical network. So, for example, you may have a network that runs cameras. You might have a network that's running access control. You might have a segregated VLAN off of sensor management that's looking for vibrations on a fence, and they all have to, be managed holistically as you look at those boundaries and how penetration in one might create a vulnerability in another. Of course, there is some things with technology and compatibility, common control networks. That's really noticeable in some areas that just simply do not have the ability to invest and keep up with current technology in the form of cameras in particular and analytics. And then, of course, there's ever-changing policy requirements and budget constraints. So there's just a number of things that you have to balance when you're operating in an area with physical security, when you're trying to keep cyber in mind. So it's about the management of risk, and there's a couple different frameworks in the U.S. that's used a lot for cyber risk management. Of course, the traditional DIACAP is a U.S. federal framework for that. There's also NIST for civilian governmental agencies, as well as industry adopts NIST. And it's really all about reducing the residual risk to an acceptable level. I don't think anyone would ever say you could reduce all risk. I mean, certainly that would have a high, financial consequence. But there is a way to balance that such that you have the appropriate controls in the physical security layer. You have those boundary protections addressed on the cyber side so that you can operate with confidence because you're actively managing that risk. So let's talk about the security layer. I mean, from a graphic standpoint, we're really talking about perimeter security, which could mean different boundaries. It could be the outer security of, the airport perimeter, for example, and then you're going to go through several check stations in terms of perimeter security. So it's not just the outer boundary, but also layers of those perimeter security. Of course, gates and entry control points and entrances are key places for cyber attacks. There are also places where you typically layer that defense with cameras and access readers and perhaps more than one network or backups associated with that. And then there's building security that, at the building level typically that's on top. And these are managed areas that may vary by building depending on the importance of the building. And back, there's plenty of CCTV and video that are available in the market, but those do not typically have the cybersecurity components associated with them to ensure that your data is not being manipulated, that in fact your feed is there, and more importantly, from an operational standpoint, typically lack analytics. So they tend to be more of a historian type of layout where you have those so that you can research post-event in terms of investigation, as opposed to a system where you're actively managing your incident. So we're really talking about video surveillance technology. There is a compliance layer. There's plenty of industry regulations, and it is about managing an area with cameras. And there is a shift from just using them, again, for historian purposes to actually managing and operating these cameras such that you can reduce manpower and benefit in other ways. So these are, of course, endpoint networked items. They're highly vulnerable just from the standpoint of what they guard. And it's very important, obviously, that they remain affordable for the particular use, but most importantly, that they're on a secure platform. They do have defense in depth from a cyber standpoint, is very important for physical security devices. I mean, you've got to have device level protection as well as network protection, particularly if you are operating a physical gate or a turnstile, or you're operating a device remotely, a barrier, for example, that you have absolute control of that endpoint controller at all times, which requires a level of cyber investment to ensure that you do have that protection, whether that's encryption, whether that's encryption plus other features is really dependent on the certain situation, the particular use. And there is an issue with gaps, if you've got remote locations where you have identified a higher physical threat level, you might place more cameras or surveillance in that area, and those would also be higher targets as well if that's a vulnerability for, if someone was really trying to penetrate your particular area. So 3TI does offer a virtual fence physical cyber solution. It's something that we have deployed and have managed and maintained for many, many years. And it is robust from the standpoint of has onboard encryption, and it does provide a virtual fence. So it is a locked law enforcement level fence that is there with the cameras that allows complete 100% coverage of a vital asset. And so we're showing here a vital asset where we're protecting through cameras, and they're not just watching video feeds. These are highly sophisticated cameras with onboard analytics that are able to transmit information in an encrypted fashion, such that you can be assured that you have 100% positive control and availability of that data. It is secure and certified. We have a number of certifications listed here, as well as it has participated in several, cyber hacking events, red team performance endorsements, and things of that nature. So it is a proven performer, and it is a 3TI networked system. It has analytics, which allows it to be a functioning operational platform. I'm going to quickly flip through the next several slides, but these are the features here you can see on the left, and these are what the analytics do. And collectively, it allows an operator to be notified when certain rules have been triggered, so that you're not watching to ensure that the physical human doesn't see anything odd. These are smart analytics that would alert based on rules, which are highly versatile for the particular use. So there's of course, motion detection. There's a static object, so if someone has posted themselves in an area in the dark that you feel is critical, there's an alarm for that. Presence alarm, an object, a human, even a small animal, depending on your scenario. Again, another static object that might be of concern from a physical standpoint. We have presence, path, if they're going from A to B, In terms of theft, things could be removed. A car is moving. Directional, so you can, the analytics are smart. You know, I want to know when somebody's going down the stairs, not up the stairs, for an example. From a traffic management standpoint, as well as identifying threats at entry control points, direction, motion, speed, loitering, which is interesting in coverage, and area queuing, and I think there's one more. Let's see if I can get that to click. Yes. So we have a case study with Naval District Washington, which is the U.S. Navy region, where we have deployed this system with smart analytics. We've been in place for almost 10 years now. We're in about 18 independent bases for ashore perimeter security, and it is an operationally critical system for NDW, in that it does provide local and regional view of these tools, and it has helped them with their anti-terrorism force protection capabilities while meeting all of the requirements needed for the U.S. military and Navy with respect to threat vectors and certifications. And it is always growing and continues to grow throughout the U.S. market, but also abroad. And again, the differential here in large part is associated with the encryption with the endpoints, so that there is cyber confidence with the physical security protection. As well as the fact that it is an operational system, and that it is not just used for history, but has smart analytics programmed, which then can be used to reduce manpower on the street and other things associated with becoming more efficient at a centralized location. So we focus on DoD certification for this, as well as IA certification that is required, and it is a key differential that is not only time-consuming to achieve, there's also a fairly large financial component with it to maintain the certifications, because sometimes the standards do change. They are not static, but it is our commitment and our differential to ensure that we have the third-party creds. So we typically will invite and ask potential folks of interest to look it up, or we'll help you look it up, but to not take the word of the manufacturer or of the service provider, that we want to be a trusted consultant and ensure that you know the level of accreditation of the system that goes in when you purchase something like a 3TI virtual fence. And we're pretty serious about it. It is a very key core commitment that we have in terms of our cybersecurity portfolio and our differential. So to close, a little bit about, why would someone be interested in, listening to us and to hearing this, and as well as to discuss things like video surveillance and perimeter VPMS, the virtual perimeter monitoring system. We specialize in cybersecurity expertise. We have a strong pedigree. It is our differential, and we build our products around that cybersecurity, and as well as our consultation business around that. We have life cycle support in our ISO accreditation, as well as our certified solution recommendations. So we have multiple patents associated with this. We are committed to ensuring that our clients understand the balance between physical and cyber, and it's not always necessary to lock everything down, so there is a risk management framework associated with that. and we like to work with clients on those particular details to ensure that purchases and investments are made for the right reasons to reduce the risk to an acceptable level, not to reduce it entirely or to a point that is of a declining ROI, but to match that for our clients. And so we offer a range of cybersecurity solutions in the video surveillance market, and the virtual perimeter monitoring system is the one that is the most secure and does provide that uncompromising confidence of data security in terms of the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of that key data for perimeter defense. So with that, I am at 30 minutes. So let me just stop there. This is my phone number, my email address. Happy to discuss any of these topics with you, on these concepts with you. We really love to take that time to understand the issues and concerns of folks in industry, so that we can also advance and learn and grow. And I want to thank you for your time today. So we have a question about how we approach looking at physical and cyber in terms of tailoring for various circumstances. So we essentially begin with understanding the requirements of the client. They vary from U.S. government to foreign government to key businesses in the global marketplace, and it takes some time to understand the priorities of that mission business associated with physical security. And so there is a considerable amount of learning on our part with that client to understand your risk tolerance associated with the various layers and associated with, where you are in the world and the threat vectors and the risks that you perceive. And we have risk management consultants that work with the client on that understand how to balance that information with options available to you. And that's both physical options in terms of how many layers of physical checks and gates are necessary to achieve a certain level of confidence, as well as the various methods of authentication and access control. From a physical standpoint, as well as camera coverage and view planes and things of that nature. And then coupled with that is also the concept of what you're concerned about, how much of this is going to be networked and how will it be networked. Do you want to run your physical network in connection with an IT network, for example? Do you want to network them all together? Do you want to separate them? Do you have other critical pieces of critical infrastructure, for example, a SCADA system or maybe an electrical transfer station, a substation that's important to you? How do you want to guard that separately, or do you want to treat that separately as utilities? So we talk about that with our clients. We address and we listen, and then we address some of those things and interpret that risk. And then we provide options associated with how many cameras, the level of encryption necessary, how these should be networked in, how do you manage the ease of wanting people to come in and out and balanced with your particular risk tolerance associated with authentication, and how do you use smart cameras, smart analytics, and physical access together in a defense in depth. So it is a holistic approach. It is not often that we do pieces of it, although we can. We often assess a particular situation and then offer some options to improve or to address areas where your cyber risk team or your physical security team might be concerned about penetration, whether it's physical or cyber. And we can also frame the risk that you inherently assume when you have networks of networks. And so there really isn't these days too much of an air-gap network. I mean, even just for patch management, you might test it on a standalone system and proof check it and then move it over. But I mean, you're still, having this continuous need to keep new devices, endpoint devices, up to speed, patch management, and others. So you're going to have that connection in, and we can talk about how you can take steps to mitigate risks that are there associated with those necessary practices. Okay, there's a question about our, how we perceive the future of cyber physical security. I mean, obviously, in my view, this is a growing area. It's a heightened concern. There are many legacy systems out there that are, reasonably functioning well to some degree, and then those systems get networked. And oftentimes they get networked without the proper thought of the risk that's introduced. And so I think this is definitely a growing field and one of concern, and it is no secret, that once you start networking things together, it's quite possible for, bad actors to infiltrate and take charge of your turnstiles and your gates and your barriers, as well as your camera feeds and your access control systems, even if we are, even if that penetration might have come in under some benign endpoint for, an HVAC system in a building, for example. I mean, that's the risk when you network things together. Okay, so there's a question about how does this apply to public sector, city, airport, stadiums, conferences, events? Yes, so there are many analytics that are very analogous to management of high-risk events, such as sporting events, the Olympics, of inaugural events, of large conferences, really what we would consider to be high occupancy, high threat level areas. And through the analytics tool in the video solution, you can set up permanent, which is typically your, firm fixed cameras and access control points, as well as portable access control and cameras that can monitor areas in different ways. And with the analytics, you can set up, in particular, like stadiums and other things where you're concerned about, a security incident, loitering or packages left. That's very analogous also to airports. We do support airport security in the U.S. associated with physical security, and these are, again, smart solutions that are not CCTV cameras, but these are smart video solutions that are part of the operations that typically would feed into like a central operations area, like for a large event where you're managing and you have a security center. These cameras are fed there with those analytics. And the key, too, is that because of the setup, you can also enable the video feeds to be pushed to first responders, so that a first responder who might be responding to something at, a bomb threat at a courthouse or something, having the analytics and the cameras inside and outside the facility, that first responder can have access to those video feeds live, so that he has that live intel as he is prosecuting the situation on the ground. And that's a key feature that can be enabled and it can be done in a secure fashion with a number of different communication methods. Okay, there's a question about minimum components, how many components. So it really depends. So if you have a relatively, let's just say you had a single building and you were concerned because it was a high-value target or it was part of your critical infrastructure, you may choose, after, again, assessing your risk and understanding the level of risk that you want to protect against, you may choose to cover only your entry point and maybe your back loading dock, for example. In that case, there may just be a few components. There's not a minimum number of components necessary. I mean, you could set up a single camera with a number of analytics rules if you had a very singular concern. On the flip side of that, you could have thousands of cameras that are networked in a variety of ways. I mean, one way would be to have a large local area network and have a self-healing web mesh networks for wireless, which is a common thing that we have, that we do to protect not only an outer perimeter, but also to provide kind of a smart arena or a smart campus where you're able to provide those feeds into law enforcement that are not only on the outside but on the inside. That might have thousands of cameras networked together. I'm seeing a comment about video analytics and the virtual fence, car license plate. So there's different features that are associated with different types of cameras. So there's cameras that are designed for license plate readers, and we do have those, yes, as part of authentication that you might see at an entry control point. In terms of those cameras are different in nature than ones like for a high area view. And I would like to highlight that we are not a manufacturer of any specific camera. What we offer are the analytics, so the smart components and the cybersecurity aspect of that operational requirement. We are relatively agnostic when it comes to camera manufacturers. We certainly might advise, depending on your situation, certain cameras or certain manufacturers or types of cameras, but as long as it meets some basic minimum requirements, we can ingest data even from existing cameras, and most times can put some form of analytics and encrypt that data for you. So there's a question about demo. So we do offer demos, and we also routinely present at various conferences. So if you are interested in that, you can contact us and we can facilitate something that's convenient for you and can kind of work with your specific requirements. Let's see, there's a question. There's a couple folks have asked about outside the U.S., and the answer is yes. This technology is exportable outside the U.S., and as well as our, again, beginning with consultation services and understanding. I mean, this is not just about, hey, here's the camera. It's about understanding what capability will help you achieve your mission, goals, business, governmental, or otherwise, in a more cost-effective and cyber-secure manner. I see one question about integration with third-party software. Yes, we do. We have agreements with various third parties that provide specific enhancements to our system, and it does include a number of access control, variety of access control specific, as well as some particular analytics associated with specialty requirements. The third-party software, so there's some that's mentioned in a question, and yes, all those are ones that we work with. If you were the person that asked that question about third-party software, I really am not at liberty to name those third parties, but yes, the answer to your question is we do, and with those and others associated with, again, pretty much any of the camera manufacturers, but also with some of the again, the specialty analytics, and those are tailored, they're bolt-on to and can be integrated with the virtual perimeter monitoring system. And again, we talked a little bit about, you know, not just people, and I was very focused on gates, but there also is an air defense and ground defense in terms of ground sensing radar and drone detection, and there's all kind of other features that are available for managing a holistic perimeter. Okay, I'm getting the signal from the team that we're at our time and have answered, I think, most of the questions. If we've missed one, I'm sorry. It's certainly not my intent. You can reach out to us anytime. We're happy to consult. It's always a pleasure to do these. I like doing these, and 3ETI is headquartered in Rockville, Maryland, and we're always happy to host folks in our own demo room so that you can put hands on and have a first eyes on some of this technology and can judge for yourself about whether this is something of interest for you or have suggestions for us in industry.